Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7, episode number 1530. And today we are starting our coverage of Solo, a Star Wars story, the expanded edition. That's the name for the novelization. We have another expanded edition novel, just like we got with The Last Jedi, and we can expect to learn a lot more about what's going on in and around the events of Solo, a Star Wars story as depicted in theaters. And interestingly enough, it's kind of funny to read it as the quote-unquote expanded edition, because thinking back to the novelization for Rogue One and for The Force Awakens, obviously those two were not called expanded editions, but that's essentially what they were. I mean, we got more information from those two novels than we actually got in the movies themselves. So, it's an interesting way of framing the whole thing. Maybe it's a little bit of a marketing gimmick, but hey, why not? Give it some additional oomph, right? Give it a little bit more cachet for why, excuse me, why you might want to be picking this up. Anyway, so here's how we're going to approach this. The novel has been out for about a week, so you got a spoiler warning here, which is that, hey, if you haven't read it yet, don't want some of these details spoiled for you, then, save this episode for a later date. Thank you so much for joining me for it in the first place. Thank you for subscribing if you are getting it delivered to you by whatever service you happen to be catching this episode on. And we're going to go through the novel and pick out some of the most important elements that will enhance your viewing of Solo, a Star Wars story when it comes out on home video. Is that how it? I mean, it's not video cassettes anymore when it comes out on streaming services on Friday the 14th and on DVD and Blu-ray on September 25th. So we're going to start by talking about the introductory segment of the movie, which is Han and Qi'ra on Corellia, and the new and interesting things we learn from the novelization about that. Now, honestly, there's a lot of new stuff, and you could really spend a lot more time on episodes saying, oh, well, what about this detail and this detail and that detail and the other detail? But I'm going to pull out ones that I think might be particularly interesting. First of all, if you are a fan of the vehicles in this joint, then I will tell you that the speeder that Moloch is driving is referred to as a truck speeder, which is a phrase that I have never heard in any Star Wars reference before. And if you've heard it before, then by all means, drop me a line wherever you're catching this episode and let me know where else you've seen a reference to a truck speeder. But I thought that was a new and different way of phrasing something. I think it's, perfectly apt for that gigantic speeder. It's not so much of a land speeder. It needs something with a little more a little more heft to its classification. So there you go. That's a truck speeder. And when we were talking about the Infiltrator, which is the name of the Imperial fighter that Han is flying in when he's in the Academy, and we talked about the fact that there had only been one reference to a ship called an Infiltrator, and that was the Sith Infiltrator, the Scimitar, which was Darth Maul's ship in The Phantom Menace. But it turns out that the Infiltrator is actually the name for a ship that we have seen already. It's also referred to as the TIE Brute, or the Heavy TIE Fighter, and that is the same TIE Fighter that we saw, the unique one that we saw when Han and Lando and company were in the midst of the Kessel Run, trying to escape from Kessel and also having to escape from the Imperials investigating. Now, speaking of Han being in the Academy, we get another scene related to the Academy, and this is different from the one that we talked about on a previous episode, the excerpt about him getting called on the carpet about his unorthodox flying maneuvers and breaking ranks from a formation and all that fun stuff. There's a discussion about him that happens between a couple of Imperial officers, and one of them is going, why haven't we drummed this guy out in the first place? We've kicked people out of the Academy for doing worse than what he's done. And basically, the report on him is that he has reaction times better than anybody else does, and he has innovative problem-solving skills that nobody else has ever seen in the Imperial Navy. Now, That's not necessarily a benefit as far as the higher-ups are concerned. Their take on it is they'd rather have 100 officers who just follow orders without thinking about it than one maverick. They're like, there's no room for rebels in the Empire. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So they're going to give him one more shot, which then leads to the situation where he's in Onyx Squadron and he breaks formation and manages to save one of his wingmates, but the fact that he broke formation and put everybody else at risk is the thing that finally gets him drummed out of the Naval Academy. And speaking of Imperial officers, as we were, well, the Imperial officer Falthina Sharest shows up in this, and Falthina is the woman who's behind the glass negotiating with Han and Qi'ra over the coaxium and whether it can be used to get them through the security gates. So there's a bit of additional biographical information about her in the Solo, A Star Wars Story official guide that was penned by Pablo Hidalgo and released by DK Publishing, and some of that biography is actually expounded upon by Mur Lafferty in the novelization, so you get to know a little bit more about how overworked she is and how she is accepting presents that will make up for all the time that she should be getting paid for by the Imperials but is not getting paid for. She doesn't think of them as bribes, she thinks of them as presents. And so unfortunately with the commotion that happens when Moloch and his people catch up with Qi'ra, her decision, is essentially a face-saving decision on her part because she can't let it be seen, with this commotion at the security gate, anybody else coming over to investigate what's going on, trying to let Qi'ra go through because then they might find that coaxium that she's trying to stash. So she has to distract everybody else by creating the security commotion. So it's actually a little bit of a shame. It's not that she's just being a jerk per se. She is actually just trying to cover her own backside in this, and there's a very quick calculation that she does to figure out what the optimal outcome is for her while still being able to keep the coaxium and feather her nest egg to do exactly what Han and Qi'ra want to do, which is get off of Corellia once and for all. So that's 4 top takeaways so far, roughly grouped, and I've got 3 more for you relating to Han and Qi'ra, and also the White Worms organization too. So we'll talk about those after the break, and a quick word about our fine friends at Nissan. Stay tuned. Hey Rebel Rouser, have you ever wanted to take a land speeder for a spin, or maybe even the Millennium Falcon itself? Well, here's the next best thing. You can make your own custom Solo, a Star Wars Story inspired Nissan with the best in Galaxy customizer. Just go to sw7x7.com/custom to customize and share your own Star Wars inspired vehicle. And don't forget, Solo, a Star Wars Story is coming home on digital September 14th, Blu-ray September 25th, and new on 4K Ultra HD as well. Welcome back. All right, so here is a 5th top takeaway. As Moloch is trying to find Qi'ra and Han, he's considering how things could go back at the White Worm lair, and that Lady Proxima might actually kill everyone who bore witness to what went down when Han threw his thermal detonator, because she could not be seen as being weak, and obviously that was a situation where Han got the best of her and she got totally burned by all the sunlight and whatnot. And Moloch is seeing this as a possible way for him to get into the leadership position of the White Worms, to actually make a move and get rid of Lady Proxima. So there's a little political intrigue that is developed as a result of this thing. When we'll have to look later in the novel to see if anything comes of that. And then the 6th thing I want to share with you is the actual details of what went down with Han and how he got the coaxium in the first place. So he was supposed to sell 7 vials of coaxium to this guy named Kilmo and his gang. And when he showed up at the meet, he actually only produced 5 of the 7 vials. And apparently Kilmo was already hip to that jive, because he said, hey, the deal was for 7. And he was like, oh, wait. And started fishing around in his pockets and was like, oh, here's one more. I found the other one, and it's 6. And so they're like, no, it's 7. It's supposed to be 7. And he said, well, you could always pay a lower rate for a fewer number of vials, and so he tries to negotiate them down on the money, but they obviously think that this is not what they wanted, and it's just Han with a whole bunch of other gangsters that are there, so they can just beat him up and take the things from him and not spend a dime. And so that's how things go down. But apparently the plan was for Han all along to steal at least 1 and possibly 2 of the vials of coaxium. He had that plan going into the meeting in the first place. And the last thing I'm going to share with you is that this particular attempt was as close as they ever got to the both of them getting away. There apparently were other times, it's very gently alluded to that there may have been other times that they tried to escape, but clearly it couldn't have been a situation where they were caught escaping because, nothing bad has happened to them, at least up until this point. But as they are trying to escape this time, there's one element of the getaway that we did not see in the movie, and that was after they crashed that speeder, after they jammed it in between the walls there, and before they got to the Corellian spaceport, and that was that they had to lose Moloch and Rebolt and the hounds, the Corellian hounds, and Qi'ra's bright idea was to do that by going through a fish market on the way to the shipyard, and to the spaceport, and crazily enough, they actually climbed into a giant barrel of eels in briny water and hid in one of these giant barrels using that horribly disgusting smelly water to throw the Corellian hounds off their scent. And so that is how they were able to make it there as quick as possible. However, of course, that meant that they had to go to the spaceport and try to get themselves dried off, or at least, have most of the moisture off of them before they try to get through the security gates. And so it's, that extra bit of time that allowed Moloch to get to the spaceport himself and start looking around for Han and Qi'ra, and that's how everything went so badly. And that right there is going to do it for our 7. Yeah, there were 7 top takeaways from that opening shot of Solo: A Star Wars Story. Not just one shot, obviously, just that whole opening sequence, I guess you could say. And we'll talk more about other secrets revealed by the novelization in upcoming episodes. So if you're not subscribing for that, then by all means, please do join me for that. I would greatly appreciate it. Wherever you like, you can find the podcast just about everywhere you want to catch it, whether it's YouTube or Facebook for video, whether it's iTunes or Google or Overcast or Spotify or SoundCloud for audio, you name it, you can probably find Star Wars 7x7 there. And hey, if you are enjoying it too, then by all means, please do consider putting a tip in the metaphorical tip jar and support me at patreon.com/SW7x7. That's patreon.com/SW7x7. For now, though, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode wherever you happen to be catching it, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2018 Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it!